So it's Friday night. So we're gonna kick off this session, or rather a series of sessions, talking about equipment. So we're going to talk about, particularly today, masks, etc., and facial equipment, and then on Monday we're going to carry on with other pieces of equipment. Now, a couple of things that I need to say before we move on is that our sport is we're quite lucky with our sport, freediving, in that there are certain things that we should be practicing every day without water, just dry exercises. We should be doing bedtime stretches. We should be doing some sort of dry breath hold for awareness, etc. And we should be doing equalization exercises, either with the ETT, the bombilla, which we haven't looked at in these sessions yet, so the ETT, or the soft equalization exercises we did yesterday. We should be doing these every day. So while we're in lockdown, there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing these, and you know, it's only going to help us when we get back. Obviously, we got cardio exercises that we can be doing. That's fine, but there are specific things that we should be doing for freediving. Oh, and stretching. That's what I was trying to remember. Stretching. So doorway stretches, chest flexibility, upper back flexibility, which we can't do in the water. We can do in the water, but there's a lot. Most of that sort of thing. Yeah, all of those things I've mentioned are a lot more efficient if we do them dry anyway. So we should be knocking that on the head. But more kind of pertinent to the lockdown situation that we find ourselves in. I was chatting to my jiu-jitsu coach yesterday. So hi Junior, if you're online. And I was talking about jiu-jitsu, but it carries straight over onto freediving. That almost as important as the exercises, the dry exercises that we can do, almost important is just involve your brain, your thoughts, your awareness, involve it with freediving. So spend some time and actually lock it down and say, right, this is my hour of freediving or half an hour of freediving. And if it's watching YouTube videos or watching one of these sessions or investigating some of the bit of equipment that we'll be talking about later tonight, I'll be talking about later tonight, investigate that. Just keeping your mind sharp and keeping your mind on the sport, and that's super important and super underplayed. So Junior was telling me this with jiu-jitsu, and yeah, obviously we can't actually roll jiu-jitsu with. You need another person to do jiu-jitsu. We can't do that in the same way that we need a pool to do freediving or water. We can't do that. But keep your mind on target. Keep it sharp. Thinking about it. So not even every day, but every other day, spend some time. Tell the family and say, look, this is I'm busy for half an hour. I'm not just watching YouTube. I'm actually purposefully investigating freediving. But think about it. Think about what you want to get out of it. And they've announced yesterday that we got at least 3 weeks. So I said earlier in the week that I'm working on a 4-week idea. That lockdown's going to start kind of pulling back or closing down. Can you close down lockdown? I don't know. Opening up lockdown in 4 weeks' time. So we're looking at the end of where are we? The end of May, which is fantastic for us to get that kind of target for our thoughts. Okay, so without further ado, a couple of people have asked about equipment and several pieces of equipment. So I thought I would do a whole session, a whole series of these sessions about different types of equipment. So, and tonight I'm going to start with masks and facial equipment. So, we should refresh our minds about pressure before we talk about masks. So, if you take a bottle of water, a water bottle full of air, not full of water, definitely full of air, and a beautiful demonstration here. You take it at the surface and you take it down to 20 meters. You don't need to know the maths behind it, but the pressure increases, and at 20 meters it will squish that bottle like a tin can. It will squish that bottle like the picture there. Okay, that's how much pressure will be exerted on that bottle at 20 meters. Okay? Doesn't affect us as much if we're scuba diving, but when we're free diving, this is what happens, and this is what happens to every pocket of air that we have when we go free diving. And there's 5 pockets of air that we take free diving. Okay, 4 that we need to know about, and 1 that we don't really talk about, but it's super important. So the 4 air spaces that we take with us are the lungs, the mask, the ears, and the sinuses, and the last one is the wetsuit. If you've got a wetsuit, it's got tiny little air pockets in it, and all 5 of them will react to the pressure exactly the same as that bottle that we have on display there. So at 20 meters, every of those air spaces will that will happen to them. Okay, so you really need to bear that in mind, and I'll be talking about obviously wetsuits later in the session, like next week. So, but for now, just bear that in mind. So, we would like to see when we're underwater, okay? And our eyes are fantastically well built to cope with light refracting in from air, and then it hits the lenses of the eyes, and the lenses focus the light on the retina, and we can see. But if we're in water and the light coming from water and hitting the lenses, our eyes aren't particularly well made for that. That's why if you put your head underwater, everything goes fuzzy. Weirdly enough, if you keep practicing with your eyes open, your muscles become stronger, and you can start seeing better quite quickly underwater with no mask. And there are many people who claim to be able to read books without a mask underwater. But I don't know about reading books, but it definitely gets better and you start getting to see stuff. That's beside the point. Our eyes, all day, every day, we're used to air in front of the lens. So when we go underwater, we try and keep that air touching the eyeball. So what we do, we put on a mask. Okay. Now, this is, as you can tell, completely standard scuba mask, one that you can buy in any shop. All right, and as I put it on, you'll see if I get the light right, you can see that there's 2 holes in here that allows me to pinch my nose. Okay, so as we go down, I can equalize my ears quite effectively, and I can see underwater, and I can see all the fish. Woohoo! Okay, but let me just go back to this picture. As I go down to 20 meters, this mask, which is, let's say, reasonably large volume of air, okay, will start squishing onto my face, okay, quite a lot. And so what I need to do is blow out through the nose to equalize the mask. Okay, very, very simple. And that's another reason, well, that's the reason why the nose needs to be enclosed in the mask, so that I can equalize the mask so it doesn't squish in my face or pull my eyeballs out. Now, The downside of this gorgeous scuba mask is there's quite a lot of it's quite big. It's quite a lot of volume of air in it. So what those clever freedivers did back in the 60s and 70s, they started developing masks specifically for freediving. For instance, this one here by Cressy, super cheap. They're like 25 quid. Cressy Super Occhio, and it's a lot less volume. You can see that the profile of it's a lot less. Usually they have two lenses. You can get with one lens, but that just allows there to be hardly any volume of air in it. Can I just show that to the camera? Does that show? Let's kind of try and show how much air is. No, you can't really see it. Okay, but you can see by the profile that that's massive, and that's really narrow. Okay, so this is a standard freediving mask. Allows us to see underwater. It's got a nose piece, so we can equalize the mask, and we can equalize our ears because we can hold the nose. Now, an interesting fact here. So that's where freediving masks kind of come from. An interesting fact that this beautiful big mask that we've got, somebody tried to take this down to in the set tower. Sam Still, in fact, took this down to nearly 30 meters, and there's two things we found out about this. The first is that it's incredibly difficult to get enough air out of your lungs to fill this mask. Okay, incredibly difficult. Right? But the second thing is when he got to, past 20 meters, he had a massive big airspace attached to his face. So as he went down head first at 20 meters, he turned around and was being pulled up to the surface by this a life buoy attached to his face, which is quite funny. And we didn't think about that. But anyway, so that's just beside the point. I wish we'd filmed it. We never did. And we never will, because the set tower's not there anymore. Okay, so moving on from there, this is the lowest volume mask commercially available. It's called I don't know what it's called. It's lower than the Sphera, which is what most people know as is the lowest volume, but actually this is a lower volume, and you can see most of it's rubber, and it actually hugs your face. Most of the rubber is real close to your face. Okay. It's got a plastic lens, which means it scratches really easily, but it does look pretty cool. You can see hopefully that it's super close to my face, so super low volume. Okay, so this is the lowest volume mask commercially available, and until I'm like to say 12 years ago, in freediving competitions, you had a choice of no mask or commercially available masks, and you weren't allowed to modify them. So the picture of in Le Grand Bleu, where Enzo Maiorca fills his mask with silicone, you weren't allowed to do that. It had to be a commercially available mask. About 12 years ago, they changed the rule, and you could wear anything you like. And so people started filling in the mask with silicone, so it didn't have as much air in it. A little known fact. So they started copying the Grand Bleu. So the Grand Bleu kind of came true, 12 years ago. But then people also started doing other things, like wearing something like this, which is a tube mask. Okay, so it's a standard mask. Okay, but it has a tube attached to it. Okay, so let's move the nose clip out of the way. So it has a tube attached to it. Okay, so when you put it on, you can actually out of the way. You can actually equalize the goggles. Oh, it's a little bit bent. It's been in my bag too long. with the tube. Okay. Now this means, okay, my nose. I don't need my nose in the mask because I can equalize the mask of the tube. But then it allows me to wear a nose clip, so I can equalize again. So for no fins, it's very, very useful to have a nose clip on. Okay. Now you may be laughing at this technology. You might be going, ha ha ha, what a crazy, crazy thing. But Herbert Nietzsche used it in his, I think this is 186 meter record, and you can see he's wearing a sphere with a black tube on it, and this is the video on my YouTube channel that I put up. And then again he used it in the 111 meters this was constant weight, and this was 2006. So he used this. Now interestingly enough, he didn't use it in a pure sense. So he had the tube in his mouth when he did the warm-up dives, so he could keep water off his face, out of his eyes, and he could see what he was doing and get his equipment right. And I was talking to him, he could look me in the eye. But when he did his actual dive, he just let it go. So you can see that in the 186, he doesn't have the tube in his mouth, he just lets it go. Okay. There was water went in it, but obviously there was air in it as well at the start, and that air compressed down, and then when he came up, it expanded, and because he knew that the tube was where the water went in, okay, and there was a certain amount of excess air, so even with a little bit of leakage, there wasn't much leakage because the tube was quite low down. He actually found, he went down to the bottom, when he came back up, he could actually see there wasn't much water in the mask at all, okay, which kind of helped him quite a bit, especially on the surface or near the surface when he had to kind of do stuff. Okay. So he didn't really use it for keeping his eyes clear during the dive, but he did actually wear them on several world records. On another level, Loic used just normal goggles, and he filled them full of seawater, and this was purely because he didn't like the feeling of the water going over his eyes, so he just put a pair of goggles on, filled them full of water just before the dive, so he opened his eyes and he could see roughly where the sled was, where things were, kind of a blurry image, but essentially as he was going down he didn't feel the water on his eyes. Okay. But most people now just dive with no mask, and they wear a nose clip like this. I've got to say, this is the best nose clip in the world. Okay, thanks to Hipster, the first ever titanium nose clip. Okay, super lightweight and super strong, but more importantly, it fits like a vice. Okay, which you need if you're going to go on a sled. So that's a pretty nifty nose clip, which I can tell you how to get one if you want one. Just ask me on Messenger. Now these days things have moved on slightly more. A few years ago, maybe 8-10 years ago, there was something called the fluid goggles that came out, and these have you put water in them, but the lenses on the front of them are super powerful. Okay, so you fill them full of water, so you don't need to equalize them. Okay, but the lenses on the front compensate for the fact that you've got water against your eyeballs. Okay, so these are available. They're about €300, and literally somebody cuts out the front of a pair of swimming goggles and glues those lenses in to the right place. They're not fantastic for seeing fish. Okay, that's why you don't see people wearing them when they go snorkeling or looking at fish or taking photography. But they do give you a sense that quite clear, quite a narrow field of view, but quite clear if you want to grab a tag or if you need to do something fairly mechanical. Okay, fairly easy. So they do work, and they work quite well. moving on from that, there's the new Bladder goggles, which I think several people are making, but Hectometer are making them. And now these are really innovative, and they're only about 3 years old, something like that. And you can see there's a hole in the goggle, and behind that there's a bladder which fills up full of water. So your eyes still have air against them, but there's a little bladder that fills up and takes up the space around the eye, fills up with water, and so as the air compresses, okay, the bladder fills up with water, and just a tiny bit of air that's left is left in front of your eyes, so you can still see. And they claim these have been tested down to 80 meters, 90 meters, and they claim that they work really well. And the people I've spoken to have used them say that they're a little bit strange to get used to, purely because they're something new, but they work really well. They're just like wearing swim goggles, and you don't need to equalize. But of course, you still need a nose clip. Okay, I'm going to suggest a titanium nose clip. We still need a nose clip, otherwise air's going to escape through your nose. Okay, so that's the various options that you have. There is another 2 options which I'm going to talk about. I'm going to mention. And they're a little bit strange, but they have been used. So the first was made famous by Andy Lasource, and that was 20 years ago or so. And he wore contact lenses, but they have an air gap in them. Okay. Now the world records back then, I think Andy Lasource did a constant weight with fins, stereo fins, to like something in the order of 80 meters, 70 meters, something like that. So it's still quite deep, and he wore one of these lenses. And I'm pausing because I'm just thinking, hey, I've got an old copy of Freediver magazine, thanks Howard Jones, the unsung hero of modern freediving. Howard Jones produced a magazine called Freediver, and I've got a copy of it, and it's got a picture of Andy Lasource in it. So I'm going to dig that out for tomorrow. Please remind me in the messages. So massive, big single. Well, he wore one, so he was very famous for always coming up and just like looking around with one eye, because he had one eye with the contact lens in and one eye that didn't. So on the surface he looked through one eye, and underwater he looked through the other. But super uncomfortable. You can only wear them for 40 minutes. Really expensive, and I think stunt people wear them for shoots, because it looks like you've got no mask on, but you can see underwater. So, and some mermaids I think wear them, but they're super uncomfortable, and super expensive. The other thing that people have been known to do is flood their sinuses. So it only really works if you're going head up, so if you're on a sled, okay, and you tend to have a nose clip on and no mask, okay, and as you hit a certain speed, okay, and a certain depth, you consciously miss an equalization, okay, so there's a vacuum in your ears, in your eustachian tubes. You take off the nose clip, and the water goes up there, okay. This is called hard flooding, and it's the most extreme version of it. And water goes up, fills the sinuses, fills the middle ear, fills the eustachian tube, but you don't need to equalize. So it's brilliant. Everybody should do it. The ever so slight down point is you probably get instant vertigo, and you probably get a middle ear infection. But apart from that, it's a brilliant idea. So Pipin Ferreras is famous for making it famous. No, he's famous and he made it famous. And a few of the people who worked under him had wet equalization, they called it, or flooding. And I believe Tanya, I had a conversation with Tanya Streeter years ago, and she said she used partial flooding, which meant when she got down and couldn't equalize. So the total flooding happens hard, happens fast, and it happens at like 20 meters. So you're on a sled, you're going down, going super fast, nose clip off, instant vertigo, and away you go. But Tanya, when she did 150 meters on the sled, this is what she told me. Again, we can look this up on videos, but she took her nose clip off and allowed water to go up. So instead of, when she ran out of air, she couldn't equalize anymore, took her nose clip off and the water just went up a little way. So as the pressure compressed the air in the middle ear, so the middle ear was trying to do this, okay, she allowed water to take the place of the air in the nose and allowed to equalization. So it's partial wet, and it only works when you head up, and she did it for a couple of it worked for her. But again, as I say with everything, and I'll say this again, especially as we're going into a whole conversation about equipment, you can buy the best equipment in the world and you will get longer dives. You are not a better freediver. So using these like trick techniques to get an extra few meters, it's absolutely 100% fine if you're going for a world record, because you're trying to do something very specific that nobody's ever done before, but you've still got to come back. So I tell people this time and time again. If somebody can't do a certain distance, say they can't swim a length underwater, okay, so what do you do? Well, you know, they float to the surface, so you put a neck weight on, they still can't do it. Then you put a weight belt on, and they still can't do it. So you put a super slick wetsuit on, like 100, 200 quid. They still can't do it. Okay, put a monofin on. Put a monofin on, more power, get there quicker. They still can't do it. Okay, put a glide monofin on, so 300-400 pounds worth of glide monofin, super smooth suit, neck weight, waist weight, and they make the distance. They haven't improved at all. All they've done is bought a lot of equipment, and yes, they will get a longer distance, but you can only get that improvement once, because what happens when they want to do 2 lengths? You can't buy any more equipment. So it's much better to keep it down to half a length and do it correctly and build up and build up and build up until you can do a length under your own power. I keep saying to people, I prefer people to improve themselves rather than their equipment. Okay. And one last story. Alan Barber was with us, and he did a national record in a pair of Speedos, a standard mask and a training monofin, and he did a national record. About 3 months later, he did another national record and smashed his old one out there. He did like another 15 meters, and people were asking him, wow, in fact the Guinness Book of Records rang me up and asked us to go on TV, but that's another complete story. They said, oh, how did you do it? How have you made such a massive improvement? Now, surely, if you know, why didn't you push hard? You know, you didn't push on the first one or whatever. And he went, no, I put a slick suit on and a monofin, and actually the second one was easier than the first one. But why didn't you do it on the first one? And he said, well, we did the first one, we got the national record, and the second one, I wanted to beat it. The whole point was to beat the record that I'd already set. So I just made it easier by wearing the equipment. Took it off the next day, went back to my training. And it does make a massive difference, but it doesn't make you a better freediver. So be careful about all this equipment, okay? You know, be careful what you use. I do love the fluid goggle, and at least this pair was made by Paul, Colchester branch Paul Crathen. I think he's still making them, especially in lockdown, if he can get the equipment. They do work really well. And for no fins, it's a really nice idea. You can see clearly, you can equalize hands free, and away you go. But you know, be careful of buying equipment. So today's film recommendation is a film called Tin Cup, and I suggest you watch it for exactly this reason. Be careful of equipment that doesn't really help. Thank you very much. Hope to see you tomorrow night. Ciao, ciao.